Number 22. The gauge pressure in your car tires is 2.5 times 10 to the 5 newtons per meter square at a temperature of 35 degrees Celsius when you drive it onto a ferry boat to Alaska. What is their gauge pressure later when their temperature has dropped to negative 40 degrees Celsius? All right. So if you notice, this problem involves changing conditions, right? We're given some initial pressure, some initial temperature. We're given some final temperature, and then we're asked for some final pressure, basically. So anytime you have changing conditions of a gas, you have to use the combined gas law, which is PI/VI over NI/TI is equal to PF/VF over NF/TF. Please, if this is not familiar, I have a general video for the ideal gas law. Talk all about this. All right, so check that out. Now, since the moles of gas are not mentioned, they go bye-bye. We just cancel them. Since the volume of gas is not mentioned, that goes bye-bye as well. We just cancel it. So now this works out beautifully to now a formula that looks like PI over TI is equal to PF over TF. It's a simple ratio. Remember, we are solving for the final pressure of the system. And therefore, I'm going to solve this algebraically now. All I have to do is bring the final temperature out of the numerator, out of the denominator on the right-hand side and bring it up into the numerator on the left-hand side. So now it's going to be PI times TF all over TI will equal PF. And here we go. All we have to do is now plug in the values. Okay. Please, though, remember that you need to plug in the absolute pressure when you're calculating. Okay. Also, that's in the general video on ideal gas law, down at the bottom under the tips section. So, and I'll leave a link in the description below for that. Okay. Now, what we need to do is we realize that we're given gauge pressure here. All right. So you need to know a conversion, and that is, again, on the video. It's the gauge pressure is equal to the absolute pressure minus then 1.013 times 10 to the 5th pascals. Please make sure everything is in pascals. All right, aka newtons per meter squared. They are the same thing. Why? Well, you remember pressure is equal to force over area. What are the units for force? Newtons. What are the units for area? Meters squared. There's the newtons per meter squared. And what's the general name for pressure? It's Pascal, right? So these are all equivalent. All right. So now the gauge pressure they gave us was 2.5 times 10 to the 5th will equal the absolute pressure minus 1.013 times 10 to the 5th. So notice we just got to add this term on over. So let's simply do that. So this absolute pressure will now become, it appears to be 3.513 times 10 to the 5th. All right, this is the value now for the initial. This is right, initial. So that's the value here that is going to be plugged in for the initial pressure. Okay, and then the temperatures, remember, they have to be in Kelvin. So we just have a whole series of conversions, right? Remember that the Kelvin temperature is going to be equal to 273.15, but who cares about the decimal, plus then the Celsius temperature. All right, so the initial Kelvin temperature here will be 273 plus then 35, right? That works out to be 308, it seems, right? 308 Kelvin. Great, that's the initial Kelvin temperature. And then we would do the same thing for the final, right? The final Kelvin temperature is going to be 273 plus then a negative 40 degrees Celsius. So it's really a subtraction. So the final Kelvin temperature looks like it should be 233, right? 233. All right. All we now need to do is just plug in all the values, and then we'll find the final pressure. But what does the final pressure represent? The final pressure represents the absolute pressure, right? But what do they want us to find? They want us to find the gauge pressure. No big deal. We just got to do another conversion at the end. All right. Please make sure only absolute pressures go into this formula. Let's plug everything on in. So the initial pressure we said was going to be initial absolute pressure is 3.513 times 10 to the 5th. Multiplied then by, wow, my handwriting is getting worse as this progresses. 3.513 times 10 to the 5th, then multiplied by the final temperature, and the final we said was 233. Then all divided now by the 308, right? 308. And just take out the handy dandy calculator and let's plug it on in. 3.513 times 10 to the 5th times 233 divided by 308. So we have a value here that the final pressure is going to be equal to 2.6, I don't know, 6 or so, 3 sig figs, times 10 to the 345. And that's again in Pascal or in newtons per meter squared. They're the same thing. But remember, this is the absolute pressure. We have to find the gauge pressure. So all we have to do to this value then is basically, remember, we have absolute pressure, or let me go to this formula. Let me put a little box around it so it stands out. We have absolute pressure. We have to find gauge pressure. So all we have to do is subtract now this pressure basically at sea level, which is 1.013 times 10 to the 5th. All right. And when we do that subtraction now, we will get our answer. So I'm just going to do it with the exact value. So minus 0.013, 1.013 times 10 to the 5th. And we get a value of about 1 point now. So the gauge pressure, right? The final gauge pressure, I'll label it GPF, is going to be equal to now 1.64 or so. 1.64 times 10 raised to the, looks like 5th. All right, and again, that's in pascals, or newtons per meter square. And that's it, guys. All right, thanks for tuning in. I hope this video helped. Please remember to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.